On my daughter Sophie's ninth birthday, the sun lit up a bright Saturday. We had just thrown a small backyard party with balloons, a birthday cake, and a few of her close friends. Everything felt ordinary until the mailbox snapped shut with a delivery. I went out and found a brown cardboard box, one corner dented. On the label, Sophie's name was written in my mother Helen's familiar handwriting, slanted, careful, the same hand she used on Christmas cards that always carried a subtle sting. I brought the box inside and set it on the kitchen table among half-finished cereal bowls and Sophie's scribbled drawings. She loved getting mail, her eyes lighting with curiosity. She could treat even a pebble wrapped in tissue as treasure. That day, she wore a rainbow t-shirt, mismatched socks, and still had a smudge of candy on her cheek. I nodded, giving permission. Sophie tore the tape and opened the box. Inside, wrapped neatly in white tissue paper, was a pink dress. She gasped with delight. "Mom, it's so pretty!" she exclaimed. The fabric was soft, embroidered with tiny stars near the hem. It looked like something from a fairy tale for a girl her age. My husband David glanced up from his laptop and muttered, "Cute, but she'll outgrow it in a few months." I forced a faint smile. "Probably," Sophie twirled, the skirt flaring like petals. I almost called it sweet, but then she froze, not slowly, not playfully, but stiff, as if struck still. Her face paled, wide eyes fixed on the chest of the dress. Her voice trembled. "Mom, what's this?" I hurried over. She held the dress out for me to see. My blood ran cold. Embroidered in soft white cursive, two words stood out, "Little Grace." My hands shook. David frowned. "Maybe they got the name wrong. Just a mistake." Sophie blinked, confused. "Mom, did they think I'm someone else? Who's Grace?" My throat closed. In my mind, the answer roared. "We don't speak of Grace in this house. Not because it's forbidden, but because every mention rips open old wounds." Sophie tried a nervous smile. "It's okay, Mom. I still like it. I can wear it even if it's not my name." "No," I said firmly. "You are not wearing that dress." My voice was low, final, leaving no room for debate. Sophie hesitated, then went quiet. I gently but decisively took the dress from her arms, clutching it close as I left the kitchen. I didn't slam the door or explain. I walked to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and stared at the pink fabric trembling in my hands. It wasn't exactly the same as the old one, but every detail echoed: the blush color, the rounded collar, the stars at the hem. And now, the name Grace, stitched across it, the name that had scarred my childhood. My heartbeat quickened, breath short and sharp, as if an invisible blade pressed against my chest. I sat frozen, gripping the fabric tight, mind awash with old images. Outside, the house was silent. Sophie, at only 9 years old, already knew when to give me space. I hated that. I hated that my little girl had learned too soon what it meant to step back from her mother's pain. I stared at that name, feeling as if I held a ticking grenade. It wasn't just thread. It was a message. A scar that never healed. I didn't cry. I just sat in stillness, letting memories crash over me like a storm tide. Deep inside, I knew this dress was never meant for Sophie. It was meant for me, a cruel reminder from the very parents who had never stopped putting Grace above everything else. I sat frozen on the bed, clutching the pink dress as if I could crush it in my hands. Just seeing the words "Little Grace" stitched there made my whole body tremble. Memories from long ago came flooding back. I saw myself again, little 6-year-old Luna, on a summer afternoon in our wooden house on the outskirts of Denver. That day was my birthday. My mother Helen always had a way of turning any occasion into a spectacle. She sent invitations everywhere, to neighbors and distant relatives, until the living room was packed. On the table sat a vanilla cake with buttercream frosting, the one I had wished for. Next to it were a few gifts wrapped in bright paper. I sat on a wooden chair, hugging a small box in my lap, believing this would finally be the day meant for me. But only minutes later, no one remembered it was my birthday. The door swung open, and my sister Grace appeared. She wore a sparkling pink dress embroidered with silver stars at the hem identical to the one I was holding now. Grace twirled, her blonde hair cascading like waves. Every gaze turned to her. Applause roared, cheers drowned out the words "Happy Birthday" that were supposed to be mine. I still remember the feeling, standing in a crowded room but becoming invisible. I tugged at my mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, it's my birthday today." She didn't look at me. She smiled faintly and said coldly, "Don't ruin the mood." That sentence was like a blade, slicing through the excitement of a 6-year-old. I quietly stepped back, sat in the corner of the sofa, and hugged my tiny gift that no one cared about. Grace, only 8 then, already knew how to command attention. She was invited to the center of the room to dance a few steps, and the guests clapped as if they were watching a star on stage. I looked around. No one noticed the cake with "Happy Birthday, Luna" written on it. The candles weren't even lit. I bit my lip hard, swallowing my tears. That night, after everyone left, I asked myself why I was never bright enough to make my parents proud. I tried copying Grace, her smile, her handwriting, even practicing spins in front of the mirror, but the more I mimicked her, the more lost I felt. In their eyes, I was only a pale imitation, while Grace was the light. From that party on, I understood, in this family, all attention belonged to Grace. I was just the shadow beside her. And the sight of this pink dress now, with Grace's name sewn across the chest, hit me like a blow straight from the past. It proved that after all these years, my parents never stopped replaying the same script, celebrating Grace while I was pushed to the margins. I sat there, heart pounding as if I had been dragged back to that 6th birthday. The entire room came rushing into my memory again, the laughter, the cheers, the dismissive looks when I tried to step forward. The heavy sweetness of buttercream the candles never lit, all blending into a lump in my throat. I bit my lip, staring at the dress in my hands, and thought, they have never seen me, not once. In that moment, I knew what I was holding wasn't just a gift. It was proof of a childhood erased, compared, diminished. And now, as Sophie grew older, they were trying to repeat it with her. My hands shook as I set the dress down. One question echoed in my mind. Am I strong enough to break this cycle before it swallows Sophie the way it swallowed me? I sat frozen beside the pink dress, memories rolling one after another like a film played backward. The 6th birthday memory still haunted me, but the greater pain came when I grew older. Grace, my sister, didn't just steal the spotlight of childhood. As an adult, she turned the family's trust into a weapon to exploit. I was 19 when Grace left Denver for Los Angeles. She told the family she had found a golden opportunity in fashion. She had the gift of persuasion, painting visions so dazzling that anyone would believe. I still remember that evening when she spread sketches and glossy photos of clothing samples across the dining table. Her voice rang with certainty, her eyes bright. My brand will be called Starlight Apparel. Everything is handmade, sustainable materials, the next big trend. All I need is some seed money. My father, Robert, looked at her with pride. My mother nodded as if watching a star being born. I, however, was torn. Part of me wanted to believe she had finally found a serious path, but another part, shaped by years of her showmanship, hesitated. In the beginning, Grace only asked for a few $100s to make prototypes. Then she sent back photos of dresses, shot in bright studios, along with fake emails from supposed buyers. I even recognized the names of big stores. Despite my doubts, I withdrew my savings from long shifts at a coffee shop. I gave her $2,000, convincing myself it was a worthy investment. She promised firmly, "I'll pay you back in 6 months, maybe double." This isn't a gift, it's a chance for both of us. I nodded, forcing myself to trust her. But the investments grew. My parents dipped into their retirement early. I emptied my account again. Grace always had reasons: paying suppliers, securing a showroom in San Francisco, covering a manufacturer in New York. She always made it sound convincing. Then one day, her phone went dead. Emails bounced back. When I called a partner she had given me, the man said he had never heard of Starlight Apparel. The floor seemed to collapse beneath me. My mother clung to excuses. Grace is probably just busy. She just needs more time. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no brand, no showroom, no clients, just a facade. Weeks later, a short letter arrived. Grace wrote, "I need to leave, to find peace somewhere else. Don't look for me. I hope you understand." That was it. No apology, no explanation. I collapsed at the table, tears streaming not just for the lost money, but because I felt betrayed to the bone. My father raged, then turned on me. "You gave her the most money. Why didn't you check more carefully?" His words dumped the blame squarely on my shoulders. The real nightmare followed in the months after. Strange credit card bills arrived, loans I had never signed for. When I investigated, the bank told me the accounts were in my name. Grace had stolen my social security number to open credit lines. At first, only a few hundred, then thousands. I went to the police, but they dismissed it as a civil family dispute. The bank demanded proof of fraud, but the documents matched my personal details exactly. I was trapped in debts I hadn't created. To keep my parents from losing their home to Grace's mess, I took on extra night shifts at the hospital. Sleep nearly disappeared from my life. Every month I sent money to them, even knowing they still funneled part of it to Grace, clinging to the hope she would return. Meanwhile, I was unraveling. Each time I opened my account, my hands trembled. I began to wonder if my life would forever be spent patching up the wreckage Grace left behind. Now, staring at the pink dress with little Grace stitched across the chest, one truth rang clear. Nothing had changed. My parents still lived in the illusion of Grace, and I was still the backdrop forced to endure it. But this time, I promised myself, history would not be allowed to repeat. Since the day Grace disappeared, my life plunged into a depth I never imagined. Not only was my savings gone, but I discovered my credit had been destroyed. Every week, my mailbox filled with red envelopes warning of overdue balances. The bills carried my name, yet the accounts and charges were unfamiliar. I still remember that autumn morning. I had just come off a night shift at the hospital, face exhausted, still in my nurse's scrubs, when a man in a suit knocked. He introduced himself as a debt collector, voice flat. "Miss Luna, the balance of $12,400 is unpaid. Without action, will proceed with legal steps." I froze, my head spinning. Before I could react, the phone rang. This time it was the bank. The woman's voice was mechanical. "An $8,000 loan under your name is 90 days past due. If not settled, it will be reported as delinquent." My hands shook as I stammered, "I never borrowed that." The answer came cold. "We have your signature and personal details. This is not a bank error." In that instant, I knew Grace had used my identity. My social security number, address, even my signature, she had access to it all. I had been too naive. The following months pushed me to the edge. Days as a pediatric nurse, nights covering emergency shifts. Sleep was reduced to a few hours on a folding chair. I survived on instant coffee and rushed meals in break rooms. Each time I opened a bank statement, despair swallowed me whole. My parents, Robert and Helen, kept defending Grace. When I choked out the truth about the debts, they brushed it aside. "She just slipped up. Grace will make it right. Don't be so harsh." I wanted to scream, "I'm the one paying for her mess while she's long gone." But I stayed silent. Words were useless. Worse, rejection letters started arriving whenever I applied for a mortgage or student loans. My credit score had sunk to the bottom, littered with unpaid accounts. Simple dreams, a small apartment, a degree to move up, slipped out of reach. One night, after finishing a shift at 3 a.m., I drove back to my cheap rental on the outskirts. The road was empty, only the wind whistling through the windows. I pulled over, sobbing into the steering wheel until it was soaked. I felt like a puppet, strings yanked by my sister and my parents' blindness. I learned to withdraw. I no longer shared my burden. Even David, my boyfriend then, now my husband, only knew part of it. I feared the look of pity in his eyes, feared he'd think me foolish for letting Grace exploit me. So I carried everything alone. Once, when I fell behind on rent, the landlord knocked, voice cold. "If you're late again next month, you'll have to leave." I turned and saw Sophie, only 4, quietly building blocks in the corner. My heart clenched. I couldn't let my little girl face instability. So I threw myself deeper into work, even as my health deteriorated. Sometimes, in restless sleep, I dreamed of Grace. She stood there, smiling, draped in an expensive coat, surrounded by designer bags I knew she could never have bought with her fake fashion brand. I'd wake drenched in sweat, taking minutes to realize it was only a nightmare. But the real nightmare was still alive. Crushing debt, ruined credit, collapsing health, and a family that turned their backs. And it all traced back to one person, Grace. I looked again at the pink dress abandoned on the table. The words "Little Grace" on the chest mocked me. For years, even in her absence, that name clung to me, dragging me down. I clenched my teeth, vowing, Sophie will not inherit this fate. Even if I must face my parents' scorn, I will sever this chain of tragedy. For the first time in years, amid the exhaustion, I felt a spark ignite in my chest, the resolve to reclaim my life. Every month, when I opened my banking app, I followed the same routine, transferring a set amount to my parents. At first, it was only a few $100s to help with utilities. Then it grew to cover insurance and eventually became a fixed obligation, as if it were a duty. I worked full-time as a nurse and took extra night shifts just to provide for Sophie and still have enough left to send them. My parents often called, their voices choked. "Luna, we're suffering. You know, since Grace left, this house has fallen apart. We have no one else to rely on but you." They spoke as if I were their only comfort. But every time Grace's name came up, their eyes softened, their voices quivered. Even after she drained us of money and left us buried in debt, they kept defending her, insisting she had only lost her way a little. I'll never forget that winter night when, after a long shift, my mother called sobbing, saying the bank was threatening foreclosure on the Denver house. I sighed, pulled out my paycheck card, and covered the shortfall. I told myself I couldn't let my parents lose their home. But when I visited later, I discovered they had secretly set aside part of the money I sent to transfer to Grace's account, reasoning that she might be struggling somewhere. I was stunned. I had been working myself to exhaustion to pay off their debts, and they were still funneling money to the very person who had ruined me. I demanded, "Mom, why? I've carried all of this already. Why would you keep helping her?" She looked at me as if I were ungrateful. "No matter what, she's still my daughter. You may be angry, but you can't abandon your sister." Her words cut me. I wanted to scream. "And what about me? I'm your daughter too." I'm collapsing under this burden, but I swallowed it down. David, my husband, often urged me to stop. "You can't keep supporting them like this. They're using you. You and Sophie are breaking under it." I knew he was right, but whenever I pictured my aging parents alone in a cold house, I softened. I didn't want to be branded the irresponsible child. Once Sophie asked, "Mom, why do you work so much? You look so tired." Her innocent eyes pierced me. I forced a smile. "So you won't have to go without." But inside, I knew I was punishing myself. My father wasn't better. He constantly complained about his aching joints and rising medicine costs. I gritted my teeth and sent more. Yet during one conversation, he slipped. If only Grace were here, she'd know how to make money. She'd help this family out of this mess. My heart sank. Even though Grace had vanished, they cherished her image more than me, the daughter working day and night to save them. Moments like that left me humiliated, simmering with quiet rage. I no longer knew if I was acting out of love or just fear of being called a bad daughter. When Sophie turned 8, I clearly remember one Monday morning. I had just finished a night shift, eyes bloodshot from a new us. Lack of sleep. When my mother called, scolding, "Luna, the transfer hasn't come through this month. We have to pay the insurance. Don't be late again." I froze, holding a cup of cold coffee. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask about her granddaughter. It was always about money. In that moment, I realized I was chained in a cycle with no escape. I swallowed my tears, but deep inside, a single thought burned clear. If I didn't stop, Sophie would grow up watching her mother crushed under a burden that was never hers to carry. I wasn't brave enough to sever ties yet. But from that day, a seed of resistance sprouted. Small, fragile, but I knew one day it would become a flame. And that flame would burn away every chain my parents had wrapped around my life for far too long. The older Sophie grew, the more I saw familiar signs from my past repeating. When she turned 7, my mother sent a few children's books with a handwritten note. "She looks just like Grace did at that age. Maybe she'll be a star one day." My chest tightened. They didn't say, like Luna, didn't say she's special in her own way, only pressed Grace's name into it. The gifts kept coming. At first, cute dresses, then ballet shoes, glittery headbands. Each package lit Sophie's eyes with joy as she opened them. But the notes revealed the truth. These are the same shoes Grace wore in her first ballet class. Or, "I hope you'll take lessons like your aunt did." David, my husband, noticed too. He said bluntly, "They're trying to bring Grace back through her." I bit my lip, unable to argue. He was right. And I knew I couldn't let Sophie become another shadow. One afternoon, Sophie twirled in a pale blue dress from a package, laughing at her reflection. "Mom, Grandma says I look like Aunt Grace. Is that true?" My heart twisted. I knelt, pulling her close. "You don't have to look like anyone. You're Sophie, and that's more than enough." She nodded, though confusion lingered in her eyes. My parents grew bolder. They called cheerful, "You should enroll Sophie in dance classes." Grace was praised at that age. "Sophie will shine just like her aunt." I swallowed anger, replying evenly, "Sophie will choose what she loves. Don't push her." Silence stretched. Then my mother sighed, "You're always so difficult. We only want the best for her." That best was the same blind love that devoured my childhood. The breaking point came when Sophie turned 9. One Thursday morning, a package arrived, neatly wrapped. Sophie tore it open on the kitchen table. Inside was a pink dress, folded in tissue. The fabric, the rounded collar, the embroidered stars, I knew them too well. And on the chest, delicate white thread spelled "Little Grace." Sophie stared, wide-eyed. "Mom, why does it have someone else's name?" My heart pounded as if time had snapped back. I took the dress from her trembling hands. "You're not wearing it," I said firmly. Sophie frowned. "But it's pretty." I shook my head, voice sharp. "You're not Grace. You don't need this to be special." David stood beside us, silent, worry etched on his face. He knew the truth too. This wasn't just a gift, it was a message, a cycle trying to repeat. That night, I sat under the desk lamp, the dress glowing faintly in its cruel embroidery. The threads mocked me. I remembered being 6, my mother hushing me with, "Don't ruin the mood." And now they wanted to cast Sophie into the same role, a replacement, a copy of Grace. But I didn't cry. My pain had hardened into resolve. I knew if I didn't stop this, Sophie would inherit my wounds. And I would never allow that. I folded the dress, slid it into a paper bag, and set it on my desk. In my journal, I scrawled, "This is no longer Grace's story, this is mine. And I will write the ending." From the living room, Sophie's laughter rang out as she built towers with David. Pure, free. I clenched my fists, staring at the doorway. It was time. No longer the compliant daughter. This time, I would stand not just for myself, but for Sophie. I sat quietly at my desk, the yellow lamp shining down on the pink dress folded neatly in a paper bag. The words "Little Grace" embroidered across the chest cut into my memory like a blade. I knew if I kept it in the house, the wound would never heal. So I decided to return it, not just the gift, but the burden I had carried for years. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote carefully, word by word. No rambling, no detours, just 3 sentences. You lost one daughter, but forgot the one who stayed. I am that daughter, yet in your eyes I never existed. Don't contact me again. From today I will carry debts only for myself and my daughter. I folded the letter, slipped it into the bag with the dress, and sealed it with brown tape. For the first time in years, my hands didn't tremble. My heart beat steady, calm. At dawn the next morning, I drove quietly to my parents' house in Denver. The same street, the old oak trees, the cracked flower bed by the porch, nothing had changed. I climbed the steps, placed the bag at the door. No knock, no bell. Just a deep breath, then I turned and walked away. In the car, my phone buzzed nonstop. First my mother, then my father. I didn't pick up. I knew what they'd say: blame, excuses, or please. But this time their voices would not rule me. I'd listened too long, believed too much, and the price was my life drained away. That night, I sat before my laptop. The list of recurring transfers appeared: mortgage payments, utilities, even grocery money I'd been sending every month. I stared at them one last time, then pressed cancel. 1, 2, 3, gone. Each click felt like snapping an invisible chain. David sat beside me, handing me a cup of tea. He didn't say much, just rested his hand on my shoulder. I nodded. Softly, eyes fixed on the now empty screen. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. I inhaled, answering firmly, "Yes, I've had enough." The next day, my phone exploded with missed calls. Messages filled the inbox. "What are you doing, Luna? Why send the gift back?" Then, "How could you cut off your own parents?" Some were harsher. I didn't reply. I blocked the numbers. That evening, I sat beside Sophie while she worked on her math homework. She looked up, eyes innocent. "Mom, why are you sad?" I smiled, smoothing her hair. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I just put down a heavy load. Now I feel lighter." She tilted her head, thought for a second, then grinned. "Like when I dropped my backpack full of books?" I laughed, pulling her into my arms. "Exactly like that." Later that night, after everyone slept, I sat alone in the living room. Snowflakes drifted past the window. I opened my journal and wrote on a fresh page, "I am no longer the daughter who carries debts for the family. I am Sophie's mother, and I will protect her from every wound I once carried." My phone buzzed again. My mother's number flashed on the screen. I sighed, set it down without answering. I knew this would make them furious, maybe even hateful. But I also knew it was the only way to break the cycle that had consumed 3 generations. Inside me was a strange stillness. No fear, no guilt, only certainty. I had ended the years of being used. From here on, I would write my own story, a story with no place for Grace's name. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt I could sleep without nightmares. In the days after I returned the dress and cut off every payment, our phone barely stopped ringing. I blocked their numbers, but they kept calling from others. Sometimes I opened the voicemail just to hear my mother shouting in anger, "Luna, you're cruel. We already lost one child. Now you want to abandon us too." I shut the phone, more detached than ever. Then one Sunday morning, as I was making breakfast for Sophie, the doorbell rang. David opened it, and there stood my parents, faces drawn and tired. I stepped out, eyes cold. Before they spoke, I already knew. "We need to talk," my father said, voice trembling. "Arms crossed," I replied. "Then talk here. I'm not inviting you in." My mother shifted nervously, glancing at the neighbors, then held out an envelope. "You have to understand we have nothing left. The bank is about to take the house. We need you." I recognized the mortgage papers inside. Anger simmered in me. I sent money for years. That debt should have been covered long ago. Don't tell me it all disappeared. My father's eyes darted away. The truth dawned. "What did you do with the money?" I demanded, voice sharp as steel. My mother lowered her gaze, tears brimming. "Luna, don't be angry. We just wanted to help Grace get back on her feet. She reached out the first year she left. She said she needed money to start over, promised she'd pay it back. We couldn't abandon her." My chest constricted. All the exhaustion, the sleepless nights, the endless shifts, none of it had been to save my parents. It had been to feed their fantasy of Grace. A bitter laugh escaped me. "So I was just the wallet. You looked me in the eye, took my money, said thank you, while secretly funneling it to the one who destroyed me," my father snapped, trying to salvage. "She's still your sister. You have to understand." I shook my head, resolute. "Number, I don't understand anymore. You chose Grace. Then keep choosing her. But don't ever come to me or Sophie again." David stepped forward, a wall between us. His voice calm but cutting. "I think it's time you left. Now." My parents lingered a moment, eyes full of disappointment, then turned and walked down the steps. I watched, feeling as though a long, painful chapter had finally closed. News of them reached me only through distant relatives. I heard the Denver house was eventually seized by the bank. Grace returned to live with them, broke and unstable. They carried the weight of their own choices. I felt no triumph, no pity, only relief that I was no longer caught in their cycle. While they struggled, my life began to shift. No more opening my banking app with dread over outgoing transfers. No more relentless debt calls. Instead, mornings meant walking Sophie to school, evenings meant cooking with David, nights spent reading or simply listening to my daughter's stories. One night, Sophie hugged me and whispered, "Mom, I love our family like this, peaceful and happy." My eyes stung. Everything I had longed for as a child, a home without comparisons, without favoritism, filled only with love, was finally mine. And this time, I held the key. I knew my parents and Grace might still speak of me with venom. Maybe they called me a traitor, but I no longer needed their approval. I had chosen differently, to build a family where my daughter would always be seen for her true worth. That night, I sat by the window, watching snow drift outside. A quiet unlike any I'd known settled inside me. After years dragged through the shadows of Grace, I had broken free. And I promised myself Sophie's life would never bear the scars that marked mine. I closed my eyes, breathing deep. This peace wasn't fleeting. It was finally, truly mine. Luna's story is a reminder that in real life, some families endlessly protect the chosen child, while the others quietly bear the weight. But no one is forced to live in that shadow forever. By breaking free, Luna not only escaped the cycle of favoritism and exploitation, but also gave her daughter a home filled with peace and fairness. Real life is the same. Sometimes the most painful choice is the very step needed to reclaim self-worth and build a truly happy family. What do you think about Luna's journey from being exploited to finding peace for her little family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.